Welcome to a new episode of IBA Today podcast. Let's talk. This is your host Mohammad Afan, and today we are doing a special episode on the request of many other students who have graduated right now. This is an episode based on Fulbright application, and we have an IBA alumni who has been a Fulbright scholar as well as now a lecturer at IBA. We have Sir Gautam with us. Mr. Gautam, how I've told you the studio. How did you like the studio?
It's nice.
Right. So let's talk. Let's start. Jump into your journey as a student at IBA and then coming as a lecturer at IBA. So how did that turned out? Coming back to the very same institute that you studied from.
So even early on, I had an inclination for teaching. I was teaching already when I was in A levels, and at that time, like a lot of students who want a bit of pocket money and who are good at studies, they start doing tuitions. That's what I did. I did in A levels. I did in IBA. Even in IBA, when we took maths courses, when my colleagues would struggle a little bit with the math and I would be able to explain it to them. That was a source of sort of, an early training for me as far as teaching is concerned. So as far as getting into teaching and getting into IBA is concerned, it was sort of like a process of elimination for me in that I didn't exactly know what I really wanted to do. But there were things that I did not want to do. I was not, very interested in uh, getting into the industry or getting into the corporate sector or getting into, I don't know, the financial sector, or that just didn't interest me. A 9 to 9 job, or you say it's a 9 to 5 job, but it's really a 9 to 9 job, and actually it's a 7 to 9 job. So that never really interested me. What did interest me was I just kept doing things that I liked, which was learning math and teaching math. Sort of teaching became a source of learning for me. It was very easy to learn stuff when you teach it to somebody else. That's the best way you learn something. So I already knew that I might end up in academia, and even and not to offend any of my professors, but when I was studying any complex course or any advanced mathematics course, sometimes they would explain something, and in my mind I would think, they're not explaining it in the best possible way. and that and that sort of you know indicated to me that I might be able to teach it in a better way. And then when I would actually teach it to my friends, and they would say, and they would be able to understand it better, they would say, you taught this well. So I would get sort of a validation, कि, oh, maybe this is not all just in my head, maybe I am good at this teaching stuff. And so that became an early indication of getting into academia. Now, coming back specifically to IBA was a decision I made when I was almost done with my master's. I was at NYU. I was doing my master's in scientific computing, and in my last, so for the Fulbright, you have to come back.
I
Right.
remember. I would think yes, someone who has done scientific computing coming back to Pakistan.
So you have to come back. So if you're doing a master's for 2 years, then you have to come back to Pakistan for 2 years as far as the Fulbright is concerned. So, and now I had to come back, and you don't immediately have to come back if you are sure that you want to do a PhD. So Fulbright has this has a clause that if you can get into a PhD program, a fully funded PhD program right after the Fulbright, you can then continue to stay in the US. You just will have to change your visa status. But once you're done with your 5-year PhD program, and that has to be fully funded by somebody, by the university you're taking it, that won't be funded by the Fulbright. So then you can sort of bypass the 2 years requirement to come back, but you have to do it once the PhD is done. So then you've spent like 7 years in the US, assuming you get done with 5 years PhD, and then you come back to Pakistan for 2 years. The reason I didn't do my PhD immediately was that I wasn't 100% sure that I want to stay in academia. And that's why I sort of came back to IBA, which was, well, I came back to Pakistan and I applied for IBA, and thankfully I got the job because I've enjoyed the last 2 years. And the reason simply was I wanted to know whether I want to stay in academia.
So
Huh?
Do you
I
study
think so because I have plans to start my PhD soon. So I think I
back
do.
in the US?
Hopefully Canada, hopefully UBC.
Uh,
Process is almost. I have a supervisor, but again, travel. If that goes well, then I'll be heading off for my PhD soon. So again, it's in the process.
hmm. Right. So UBC is one of our universities. My friend also studied from there as well in UBC as well.
Which
That's
program?
a good. I think he did his bachelor's from there.
Okay.
So it was computer science.
UBC is a great
Right.
university.
So let's start with the application process.
Mhm.
I'm a graduate.
Mhm.
If I want to go to do a master's with a
Right.
Fulbright program, what should be my steps? What should be my number one steps? And let's start underlining what steps should a student take right now.
Your number one step should be to decide what you want to do masters in or
Hmm.
PhD in. And that's really the critical step because when the Fulbright evaluates your application,
Hmm.
it's going to judge everything that you've put in that application based on which program you've asked them to give you a scholarship for, right? So if I'm asking for a master's in scientific computing coming from the Institute of Business Administration, that's going to
You
ring
did
up
your
some
bachelor's in eco and math.
econ and math, right? So
Right.
that's going to bring some alarm bells as to
Hmm.
how is it that this person wants to do a scientific computing masters when he's done his undergrad in econ and math, which is far removed from anything scientific computing. So the first thing to do is to build your profile according to what you want to apply for. The reason that I was able to successfully apply for and successfully argue that I'm fit enough to do a scientific computing program is because firstly, I was mentored by Dr. Hisham bin Zubair, who is himself an
Hmm.
applied mathematician who's done his PhD in scientific computing, right? He has his research is in scientific computing, and I was able to do an undergrad project with him. So he introduced us to the world of numerics and scientific computing. So, and my undergrad project was in that. So I had at least one marker there that said that okay, I might be able to cope up with a scientific computing masters. Another indicator was that IBA, the econ math program, at least at that time,
Hmm.
was very math heavy. I don't think it is as math heavy right now. We used to have excellent courses on real analysis, complex analysis, functional analysis. You might have heard EM students scared of the word topology because mm, it's the most difficult course they do,
Hmm.
and it was a course that they did in their last semester. So failing that course meant delaying your graduation. So it was a triggering word for EM students. But I don't think that's a core course anymore. So anyway, so I had to build my profile now. So I had two things working for me. One thing was that I had done an undergrad project.
Hmm.
The other thing was that I was coming from a program that was very math heavy.
Hmm.
And when you do something math heavy, it's very easy to argue that you can survive in any technical program,
Hmm. True.
right? The only thing missing from my profile was some computing expertise.
Hmm.
But even then, I had done a little bit programming myself. The EM program had an excellent course on essential software, which taught you at least programming, not in, let's say, C or Java or Python, but it taught you MATLAB. So you had some script level programming understanding.
Dr. Isham also teaches MATLAB or in his
Dr.
courses.
Hisham was the person who taught us essential software at that time. I think he's the person who created the course essential software. So we had a little bit of programming experience, and then the last thing that really worked for me was, I believe, my GRE score, which was above average, and it was great. So these
Let's
three
take let's say what was your score so that people know. Okay, that should be at least that should be that their target.
I will tell my score, but I will add in first a disclaimer that having a great GRE score is guarantees you. I at least in my opinion, if you get anything above 320, 325, it's going to. I don't want to use the word guarantee, but it's going to make it a pretty compelling application for the. Now I have never done the uh, application process myself, in that I have not been part of sorting through applications and looking at which persons should be shortlisted for the interview. But I do believe if I were to if I were sitting in that panel and if I were to be shortlisting student, if I see a GRE score above 320, 325, I would take a good look at that application and would probably call them for it. So my score was 333 now out of 340. Now, out of, I do believe that you don't necessarily need to get a 330 plus score. But if you do get a 330 plus score, it's a pretty good,
It's a pretty good thing to have.
pretty good thing to have on your application. But if you do not have a good GRE score, then it can be supplemented by other things, right? Your GPA, your experience.
Yeah, I've been told that if you don't really have a very good GPA, your IELTS score, your GRE score, all these scores then start getting really mattered.
Right. So a question that students often ask me is that
minimum GPA requirement
कितनी
was
GPA होनी चाहिए Fulbright के लिए? And I can't answer that because I haven't looked at the entire sample of GPAs of students that apply for the Fulbright and who eventually get shortlisted. But I will say that it's not, if you have a GPA that you think is not sufficient for the Fulbright, then it's not the end of the story. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get the Fulbright. It only means that you need to get something else to convince the application, the people who are shortlisting your application. So which means if you don't have a good GPA, then try really hard on the GRE, because GPA, you build something over 4 years. Once you're in your 5th, 6th semester, 2.9 से आप 3.7 तो ला नहीं सकते, ठीक है? 2.9 से आप ज़्यादा 3.1 ले आओ, which I think is good enough for them to at least look at your application. After that, if you have a firstly they don't ask for the IELTS, they ask for the TOEFL, and I don't think the TOEFL is particularly something that would, English speaking is, unless it's a horrible TOEFL score, it's not going to be something that they take a second look at. If it's going to be if it's an average or an above average TOEFL score, then you're fine. But it won't add to your application, in that your language skills are not going to add too much unless you're applying for a program that requires those skills. Make sense?
Talking about your TOEFL scores and being not really much impacting compared to your GRE scores. So what do you think about GRE scores? How does that play an impact when you're applying for your application?
So the GRE, on the other hand, as compared to the TOEFL, the GRE checks it's a standardized test on your quantitative skills and your verbal skills and your verbal comprehension, vocabulary and all of that. Now, you can have a whole debate on whether the GRE is a good indicator of a person's ability to survive in a master's program or not. But the fact is that you're going to be evaluated if you're applying to, especially to North American universities, US, Canada. They specifically look at your GRE score and they focus more on that rather than your institute's GPA. Now, and the reason they do that is, of course, they don't know your university. Now, a 3.8 GPA from IBA would probably matter less than a 3.5 from MIT. Right? That's a fair exception.
I think MIT has 5.
Still then, right? If you're comparing apples to apples, they don't have a measure of how good your university is, because, well, firstly, our universities don't show up in the international rankings either, right?
IB in particular doesn't have.
It doesn't. So the problem is when you're applying from universities from Pakistan, the problem is, since they don't know these universities, they don't have a measure of how good the university is, how rigorous their programs is, how difficult, how much training, how much rigor do they put you through. So even if you have a 4.0, they have no guarantee of judging how good is this 4.0. Now, if you put that 4.0 along with a 320 plus GRE score, then they will think, okay, theek hai, it has some merits, because then you have been tested against a standardized test which has been administered across the world, and
true.
So they are in a better position to judge you. Now, of course, जब आप यहाँ से Fulbright के लिए अप्लाई करते हो, तो पहले आपका यूनिवर्सिटी, instead of the US universities testing your application, it's going to be the United States Education Foundation in Pakistan, which looks at those GRE scores, and it looks at, so you're basically being compared within Pakistan. And within Pakistan, there are several factors, such as, for example, if you're coming from a big city like Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, then you have to have a really good GPA and GRE score, because from these places, there's a lot of people applying and the competition is really high. So from places, if you don't have a really good GRE score or a GPA, or if you don't have, so, and let me talk about it, bring me back to, talking about the whole profile. But the idea is that you're going to get a lot of competition. If you're IBA से हर साल, I'm sure 100-200 लोग तो apply करते होंगे for the Fulbright. So you need scores which can differentiate, right? And because the USEFP looks at diversifying, it wants people from different backgrounds, from different communities, from different regions of Pakistan. Then if you look at other places which don't have top-notch universities, which don't have access to higher education which is of the same quality as, let's say, IBA alums, GIK वगैरह, then you sort of have lesser competition. You have slightly less people applying, slightly lower GRE scores, in which case a lower GRE score might get you into that program because they want to diversify. Now, if you're coming from IBA and if you want a Fulbright scholarship, you need to build your whole profile, right? If you're applying for, let's say, the journalism program, if you're applying for, let's say, public policy, if you're applying for whatever it is that you're interested in, if you're applying for a data analytics program, which has become a huge thing now, a lot of people want कि उनको सिर्फ एक word पता होता है, data, और उसमें उनको जाना होता है.
And data science is the new
data science
buzzword.
and data bus, उसमें उनको so, and I don't have any issues with that. It's just that you need to build your profile. You need to have indicators within your whole profile, within your GRE, GPA, personal statement, and the study objectives. These are the 4 things I believe make up 90 to 95% of your profile. वो आपका GPA देखेंगे कि आपने किस प्रोग्राम में कितना अच्छा GPA है. वो आपका GRE स्कोर देखेंगे कितना अच्छा GRE स्कोर है. Can you do well in a standardized test? वो आपके पर्सनल स्टेटमेंट देखेंगे, वो आपका स्टडी ऑब्जेक्टिव देखेंगे. एंड इफ यूर अप्लाइंग फॉर, लेट्स से इफ यू हैव सम वर्क एक्सपीरियंस, दे विल आल्सो लुक एट योर एक्सपीरियंस, राइट? नाउ I'll give you my example. I did not have any work experience. So you can either apply immediately after IBA if you've decided, if you know exactly what you want to do, if you've done the hard work of building your profile over the years. I applied immediately. So I was graduating in May 2016 and May 2016 is the time I applied in. Okay? So my application was sent even before I had graduated. So I had no work experience. And
were you the first econ math batch?
I was the second econ math batch. The econ math batch, which was senior to us, was 6 months senior to us. So 1 semester senior to us. So I graduated in 2016 and then I applied for the Fulbright program and then it took a year. Fulbright takes a year, right? In April, May, you apply. By August, September, they get you an interview call. In late August or early September, your interview is scheduled in Islamabad. You have to go there at your own expense, I believe.
Yes,
and then
very much. My brother did went to Islamabad for the
you have to go for the interview at your own expense. And then in, let's say, late September or mid-October, they tell you whether you've been shortlisted or not. And once you've been shortlisted in October, then it's a whole process of waiting till they apply to the US universities for you. You give them, when you apply, you give them a list of universities
that you want to apply for.
Programs. And then they will decide whether it's a good list or not. So if you have not a great GRE score, but आपने अपनी list में सारी Ivy League universities डाली हुई हैं, they're going to cut off a few Ivy League universities. They're going to add in universities which are more of,
caliber.
Well, more of where you have a good chance of getting in. They don't want to waste a cycle where they apply to universities where you have a low chance of getting in, whose acceptance rate is already very low, right? So they might apply to one Ivy League for you, but they will apply to, let's say within the top 20, within the top 50. So they'll try to balance that list so that you have a good chance of getting into at least 1 or 2 of those universities, and then they can decide where to send you. And again, the decision is their decision. You can get into all 4 universities, you can get into 2 universities, and they will decide based on the financial situation of their own financial situation as to how much money they have available for all the candidates and how much. So let's say if there are 2 universities that are giving you the admission, one of them is willing to give you aid, financial aid, if they're willing to waive off your tuition, then Fulbright will prefer that, right? All things being equal, if they're of equal ranking, Fulbright will prefer, USEFP will prefer that they send you to a universities which cost them less, right?
Hmm.
And there have been cases, of course, where you get into a really good university, but that university is not offering you a scholarship, and you get into a lower ranked university, but it's costing them less, so they might send you there.
Hmm.
And you have cases where
That
they
is.
get a bit, students get a little bit sad.
Hmm. You.
But then,
What
of
about
course,
you? You wanted to go to NYU? Did you apply for it? Was it in your list?
NYU was in my list. My top priority was University of Washington in Seattle,
Oh.
because the reason being that they had more of a campus feel. They had more of a,
Microsoft is in Seattle, so that is one thing as well.
sure, but they had a, I wanted to be, after IBA, I wanted to be in a place which, had a college campus town sort of feel, which had, a big campus, hostels inside that campus, and, you just have that college life, which you don't get in New York, right? New York is, NYU is 20 to 30 university buildings right in the middle of,
New York.
downtown New York. So that's, and uske andar jaise, so look at this city campus, right? City campus is right in the middle of Sadr. Think of, let's say, of 5-10 blocks surrounded by IBA universities, IBA buildings, and that's NYU for you. They don't have a campus. They have the tagline is, the New York is our campus, right? And I wanted a college town. Sure, New York is there, and New York again is an amazing city, but it wasn't my first choice. But it was, and even though it wasn't my first choice, it was top of the rankings as far as my program was concerned. So NYU was number one in applied mathematics when I was going there. But they didn't tell me which universities I got in. They told me that you got an acceptance from NYU and we're sending you to NYU. I was like, okay, good enough. I don't have any complaints.
Like, I would think you would say, did you put MIT on your list as well?
I'm not sure. So MIT didn't exactly have a computational scientific computing specific program. I'm not sure. I do think I put it on the initial list, but I don't think they kept it there. I think they removed MIT. I'm not sure if I put it in the list. The universities they applied for me were NYU, University of Washington, University of Maryland, and one more. I think it was either Georgia Tech or some other, or maybe it was Texas Austin, one of those.
So I've heard of Georgia Tech as well.
Yeah, Georgia Tech has a really good STEM program.
Right. So you applied for it. You had to wait for a year, I guess, and once they give you have been selected in that particular university. So in 2016 you graduated from IBA. 2017 you were there, or 2018?
So 2016 I graduated. From August 2017 to July. Sorry, August 2016. To July 2017, I taught at Beacon House. I taught mathematics. And then from August 2017, I went to New York.
Right. So were you studying your GRE during your final year?
I timed my GRE, I think, perfectly, in that the 7th and the 8th, between the 7th and the 8th semester. The 7th semester ends around December. ठीक है, आपको 2-3 हफ्ते का मेरे ख्याल से ब्रेक मिलता है. So right around that time I started preparing, and I placed my GRE test in this first or the second week of the 8th semester. तो first 2 weeks में universities में ज़्यादा पढ़ाई होती नहीं. ठीक है, first आप कोई भी course उठा लें, it's still the introductory material. It's not something that if you don't focus too much on, you can't catch up on. So I thought that the first 2 weeks I can still use for GRE preparation, because it's not going to be too complicated of something that I'll miss out. So I had about 6 weeks in total. 3-4 हफ्ते break के थे, 2 हफ्ते मैंने 8 semester के रख लिए. And so those 6 weeks, I focused entirely on the GRE and mostly on the verbals section, because I thought कि मैं EM program से आ रहा हूँ, तो math तो मेरी अच्छी है, मुझे math पढ़ने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. So I got a little overconfident there. I focused entirely on the verbal section, and which is indicative in my scores. I got a higher score in the verbal section and a lower score in the quant, which for a person applying in STEM is a bit of a problem.
True.
But yeah.
Yeah. So, let's talk towards the end of the episode. I just wanted to talk about, your experience as a student and then experience as a teacher. And now, you have gone through NYU, you have gone through IBA as a student coming, and you have taught in Beacon House as well. Then what do you think, as a teacher, how has it been fulfilling, or how is it your role? Okay, what you learned during all these experiences in different universities or institutes?
So there's a lot of aspects to that question, because it's not a one sentence answer that I can give to it. But I think the most important thing in that whole thing is how much do you enjoy what you're doing. I do think that I enjoy teaching. It's a fulfilling thing for me, even though at times it can be very frustrating. At times it can be it could feel very thankless. It could also feel underpaid when you compare yourself to people who join the corporate sector, right? As far as teaching is concerned, and it's not a secret that teaching won't pay as much as the corporate sector will, right? If you get into
if you're an A-level teacher, I would.
Well, A-level teachers have a different business model, right? They are earning a lot.
More
But then the question is, are you willing to teach the same thing? Sure, you're going to earn a lot. But I don't think I can survive teaching the same concepts for, let's say, 20 to 30 years of my life. मैं एक सेमेस्टर में बोर हो जाता हूँ. मुझे हर सेमेस्टर नया कोर्स चाहिए होता है कि मैं अगर if this time I'm teaching calculus 1, next semester I want calculus 2, next semester I want linear algebra, next semester I want differential equations. I want to teach something that not only challenges the students but also challenge me as a teacher, which force me to review my concepts and learn something new and then teach it to the students. So I don't think I can. Sure, I would earn a lot, and the best financial decision to make right now would be to leave IBA and then start teaching in some A-level coaching and start my own. But
college.
But the best financial decision is not necessarily the best decision. Period. Right? It's not going to be as fulfilling for me as teaching at IBA. I won't get to learn as much. A-levels teaching, I could probably teach those concepts in my sleep, but I won't feel challenged there, right?
Right. So, thank you, Dr. Sir Gautam. Yeah, soon to be.
Hopefully.
Soon to be. But, sir, I have some few questions on rapid fire. I just want you to give me a single word on, what comes to your mind when you think of that. So, teacher what do you prefer? Teacher as an IBA student, or teacher or an IBA student?
Both.
Okay. NYU or IBA?
NYU.
IBA administration. What comes to your mind?
No comments.
Acha, IBA Today.
I don't know much about IBA Today to have an opinion on.
Acha, if not a math instructor, what subject you would be teaching?
Computer science, perhaps. Stuff in programming. I've taught essential software once, so maybe CS related stuff. If not math.
Students are a huge fan of your work, so I would, people, I guess students would love to get taught by you. So, Sir Gautam, thank you for coming in the episode. I really enjoyed getting to know about Fulbright as an applicant if I want to go, because my brother did apply, but he never told me any of that process. So, thank you for, sharing with our audience as well, all those students or graduates who are watching the episode right now, all those who want to apply from IBA or even non-IBA.
Sorry to interrupt you, but can I add one thing? I think it's important that students feel comfortable that if you're a past student of mine, if you have studied from me, if you're currently studying from me, if you've never studied from me, feel free to drop by my office. Feel free to get my advice on things that I can give you good advice on, right? My door is always open for students who are looking for advice on STEM related things, on math related things, on academics, on Fulbright, on applying for the Fulbright. If you want help in how to study for the GRE and stuff like that, If there's something that I can help out with, I think I would love for students to approach me and for me
Absolutely,
to.
because that is something that's the purpose of having an instructor coming in and giving in all the insight on Fulbright applicant.
And
Uh,
not only me, there are
mm,
several people within different faculties, right?
mm,
So within the Department of Mathematical Science, within the Department of CS,
mm,
Department of Social Sciences, you will
mm,
find, I think it's important for students to find faculty
mm,
who have the ability and who are willing to give the time
mm.
to help out. And there are a lot of
Huh.
faculty who are willing to help out students. And so just because you aren't currently studying for me is not, if you've studied for me in the past, more
Mm.
than welcome. If you've never studied from me, even then, if there's something that we can help you out with, feel free to
Hmm.
drop by our offices.
Absolutely. So I hope you all, got that insight. We'll also put your email as well in the description so that people who want to email Sir Gautam directly, if you want to go in STEM related fields,
Make sure it's my teacher
I'll make
email
sure.
ID, because students still email me on my student ID, which I had when I was a student. So
Right. So I'll ask you out about that, and then we'll put that. And so thank you for everyone who watched this episode. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you, if you're applying for Fulbright, I hope you get that scholarship. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.